Welcome to this episode of Creature Teachers. My name is Talia, and with me as always is Rick. And today we're going to be learning about the top 10 fan favorite animals that we've had on the show. Today we're going to do 10 through 6, and in our second episode will be 5 through 1. So what do we have today?
Well, we brought a number of different things today. I think the one that we get the most requests for is Walter. And let me see if I can get Walter out here so that we can find out what he is.
Walter.
Okay.
Oh,
So this is Walter.
he's so beautiful.
And you may remember him. We've
yeah.
had him on the shows before. He has gotten a little bit larger here. Let me just get his box back in here. Underneath, there we go. And Talia, can you tell me what he is?
He is an alligator.
Yes, he is an American alligator. And when we do our programs for libraries and such, one of the things that we always ask the kids is if they can tell the difference between an alligator and a crocodile. Now, interestingly enough, there aren't just alligators and crocodiles. There are 23 different species of what they call crocodilians, and those are the alligator-like animals. But there are only two here in the United States, and those would be the American alligator and the American crocodile. And so when we're looking at him, we can tell he is an American alligator simply by, well, there's a number of ways we can tell.
Yes.
But the easiest way to tell, and the way that you can tell from a distance, which is the way you want to be able to tell, is the shape of the snout. And if we look at him, we can see that he has a very kind of U-shaped or a C-shaped, it's a rounded snout here. And so that rounded snout indicates that he is indeed an American alligator. If he were an American crocodile,
it's going to be more
very, very pointed.
Rectangly pointy.
Absolutely, very, very pointed snout.
And another thing about the American alligators is they have these big frog-like eyes, big lamp-like eyes. And the crocodiles have more of a slit.
Yeah. Well, we can see a number of different features on these guys. If we look right behind the eye, for instance, we'll see a slit there. That's the ear.
Whoa,
and you might
really?
notice also when he's closing his eyes that we're seeing two eyelids. What we're seeing is a clear eyelid that goes front to back, and we see his regular eyelid, which is this piece that will go up and down. So when he closes his eye completely, both of those eyelids close, but he can close just that clear eyelid. That's known as a nictitating membrane, and it does a number of things for him. What it does a lot is to protect his eye. Now, he can close it, and because it's clear, he can still see things. He can still see movement.
Right.
So if he's underwater, he can close that. It's like wearing goggles, and it allows him to be able to find his food easily. But as far as protecting his eye, that's even more important. Because when you're dealing with an animal like this, he's going to be grabbing and eating things that probably don't want to get eaten. He is an ambush predator. So he's going to be sitting in the water, and if he's there, he's going to be just above the water like this. The only thing above the water would be his nostrils and his eyes, and he's waiting. And if something were to walk by, he would lunge out, grab it, and pull it back in. And in doing so, that animal might turn, scratch, or bite him, and if it were to scratch his eye, that would be devastating for him.
Could kill him. That could kill him.
Yep. So, so he wants to be able to protect his eye with those nictitating membranes.
Now, what are these pores? Are these heat-sensing pores?
You know, I don't believe they're heat sensing. I think that he just has all kinds of pores all over his body here. He has very, very supple skin. If you can feel that, you can see why it's very leather-like. But if we look at his back, we'll notice that the back is very hard, and it's because he has these almost like scales on his back. I'm going to see if I can set him down without him taking off. And yeah, you can see that each one of these is this square here. It's got a ridge in it, and those are called osteoderms. And those osteoderms are a little bony plate underneath the skin. Notice the color of his back, too.
Yeah, it's like
dark.
Yeah, like stone.
Right, and because it's so dark, it's going to absorb heat better. And we're talking about an animal that's cold-blooded. Right. So being a cold-blooded animal, he's going to have to find other sources to create heat inside his body.
Right.
And so he might sit in the sun, and having a dark back, it's going to absorb all that heat. And when it does, it goes through these osteoderms down into the bony plate. Blood flows through those very porous bony plates through his body, and it kind of warms him up. And when a reptile like this is trying to maintain his body temperature, they call it thermoregulating. And so he can do that by either sitting in the sun, or he might even open his mouth to. Lots of times lizards will do this to get rid of extra heat.
On the inside.
Yep, because they can, they don't want to be super cold. They don't want to be overheated as well. So that there's different ways that they can do that. You also may have noticed his teeth. This is
I love how
an
they
incredible
interlock.
predator. And we can notice that he's got these big teeth here. Sometimes he doesn't. He's like, I want to go home. Sometimes we can get him to open his mouth, but I'm not sure if he's going to do it right now. No. If he were to open his mouth and we were to look down his throat, we could see a couple of really cool features. And one is he does have a tongue, but it is on the bottom of his mouth right here. He cannot stick his tongue out. If he were to stick his tongue out, he'd probably lose it within the first week of his life. He'd bite it right off. And the other thing that we would notice about him is that when his mouth is open, his throat is completely closed off.
Right.
He can't open his mouth and his throat at the same time, because if he did, it would allow water to go in. And so while he was eating, he would be filling up with water instead. And so he needs to completely close his mouth before he can open his throat. He can close off his nostrils as well. And this winter, I found something fascinating about these creatures. They are survivors. They can survive in very, very cold temperatures if they need to. And when we had those terrible storms that we had, the cyclone bombs that we had, or bomb cyclone, I believe is what they call it, those storms, what they found is that it got so cold in areas where there were alligators that they froze in the water. No. And they showed photographs of these alligators completely frozen in the water. The only thing exposed was their nostrils above the water, so they could breathe.
Poor babies.
But what it allowed them to do, it allowed them to be underwater where the water was keeping them just warm enough so they weren't freezing solid, but they were still they were slowed down so much because their metabolism slowed down so much that they were still able to breathe out of the water. And that's how they survived until they warmed up enough. So he's obviously not full grown. No. These guys can get to be 60 years old, and they can be up to 15 feet long. So he's got a ways to go before he is full grown.
Now, where are his wings going to come out?
He does have very cool feet, because if we notice his feet, they are webbed. He does need those for swimming, but he uses something else for swimming that's even more,
this thing. This
that
so
big,
effective.
long, flat tail, and they can move quite well and very quickly with that long, flat tail.
You don't want to get smacked in the face
and
with this thing.
you do not want to get hit by them. They will take you right off your feet.
You'd be like, what?
They are very... Now, the other thing that's really interesting about alligators is, do you know what happens when you flip one over on his back?
Yeah, they go into like a trance.
It's just the weirdest thing. They will fall asleep. And so if we take him and we flip him over like this, he will sit there, and for a second he'll just kind of go, oh boy, I hate it. All right. And then he's got no option but to just kind of kick back and fall asleep.
Bloop.
And so when they do this, this is great, because if you're an alligator researcher or something, it means you don't have to anesthetize them. You just flip them over, and they'll completely, stop for you, and you can take blood samples and measurements and anything else that you need to do. And then once you're done, you just flip them back over again.
Like,
they wake up completely, and off they go. So he is a really neat animal.
He is so cool.
Definitely one of our favorites, too. Okay. She is one of my favorites.
This is a local, right?
This is a local. And she's very interesting. You going to go say hi? You can go over there. Good.
Mommy?
Okay.
Yes. I'll be so good to you.
Now, can you tell me what she is?
Yeah, she is a North American flying squirrel.
Oops, there we go. We have a couple of different species. Where'd you go? In my pocket? Now, she loves my pockets, and the reason for that is because my pockets are dark and warm, and she is nocturnal. And so when we see her, we can tell that she's nocturnal simply by looking at her eyes. If we look at her face, we can see that she's got these big, huge eyes there. And big eyes allow her to be able to see very, very well in the night. And that's not to say that all nocturnal animals need good eyesight. She happens to be one that does. Would you like some banana? There you go. Okay. There you go. We find that most everything likes bananas, so. And there are two kinds of flying squirrel that we get here in New England. Their range overlaps here. We have northern flying squirrels and southern flying squirrels. She happens to be a southern flying squirrel. There are 10 subspecies of southern flying squirrel, but only one northern flying squirrel. And I've had people come to me and say, you know, I saw something very similar to that, but it was a little bit larger and had a blockier head, maybe a little different color. It was probably a northern flying squirrel. We do, however, have less northern flying squirrels than southern flying squirrels. But there's another little critter that looks very similar to this one, and I know you're familiar with them, and what would those be?
Sugar gliders.
Yeah. Now, we see sugar gliders, and they are a very common, very popular pet these days, but surprisingly not even related to flying squirrels.
No, they're actually marsupials.
Yes.
They're not rodents.
Yeah,
So
they have a lot of the same features when it comes to physical features. They
yeah,
have these,
they look a lot the same.
They have what's known as a patagium, and that is this
It's
flap
like
of skin.
Flap.
And it allows them to be able to jump, open their arms and legs, and glide. And the sugar gliders have those as well.
Have that
and
too.
Realistically, they shouldn't call these flying squirrels because they don't fly per se. They glide.
No, they glide.
Yeah.
They should be gliders.
And so she's got that. No, don't go in my shirt. You can go in my pocket though. There we go. She does like the pocket. She has also another feature which I think is fascinating, and that is the tail.
The flat tail.
So we
is
look at the
flat.
tail, we can see that the tail is very, very flat, and that flat tail is just made out of fur. So it has the same bone structure that a regular squirrel would have. It's just a long bone in it.
Yep.
But instead of having that bottle brush tail, the hair actually just goes out to the side.
flat, like
and this
a leaf.
creates a really neat feature because what it allows is it allows for them to jump and glide. It gives them a little more lift. It allows them to kind of balance themselves quite a bit, but it also allows them to turn and move in a different direction. And if she happens to be gliding out of a tree and she is headed towards another tree and she sees an owl or something, she is going to, where are you going? You got to come back over here? There we go.
Yay.
She's going to be able to kind of get out of the way. The other thing that's really neat about flying squirrels is one of their behaviors, and that is that when they jump from one tree to another, they automatically assume something is chasing them. So they get to the tree, and when they land on the tree, they immediately run to the back side of the tree because they think that they're going to be getting out of the way. If an owl or something were chasing them, it's going to bash into the tree and not into them.
That's some good forethought.
Yes, I think so. But they are, as you mentioned, they are a rodent. So they are in the same family as other squirrels and woodchucks and
beavers
ground squirrels and yeah, even things like porcupines. Turns out rodents are the largest group of mammals that there is. There's just tons and tons of different rodents. And
Yeah,
so
the capybara is huge.
Yep.
and
So
that is
we're
a
seeing the
rodent.
difference between that and
It's like
something
dog
like this.
sized,
Yep.
but a rodent.
Now, as far as favorites go, she's really a favorite of mine.
Yes, definitely.
We got her as a rescue. We've had her for almost 4 years now. And she is just one of those things that she's just got such a great little personality and stuff, and she loves to be with you. If it were up to her, she would do this all day long and just stay in my pocket. Hi, are you coming out to say hi? There you go. You gonna go say hi? You want some more of that? There you go.
Yes. Yum, yum,
Yep.
yum, yum.
So I think you can see why people just think she's the cutest little thing. She has her, you know, she's kind of set in her ways. She has a great personality with me, but she doesn't like everyone. If my wife walks by and she's in my pocket, she will jump on her and bite her and then jump back on me again. I think she just gets very jealous.
Very jealous.
She is just a
Wifey's a
really
little too
kind of
close.
neat, unique animal. And these are an animal that they do not hibernate, even when they're around here. I always ask people if they've seen them before, and many people say I've never seen one. But ironically, they're as common, if not more so, than gray squirrels. But the reason we don't see them is because they're nocturnal. And being nocturnal, we're just not seeing them at night. Now, many people will say, well, I've seen them in my house. They love attics. They might get into your chimneys. They do get into those spaces there. Mine, I've got probably a dozen of them in my attic, and they jump out of my attic windows at night and come down to my bird feeders. So the way I noticed this was I would get up in the morning and go out and find that my bird feeders were down a ways, and I knew that the chickadees were not coming in at midnight and eating my feed. So I sat out there with a flashlight one night and startled them, and indeed it was these cool little flying squirrels.
Hi, that's so neat.
Oh, now you're in trouble.
I have skills with this situation.
Here we go. All right, why don't we get her back in here and we'll
so
move on. Okay. It's one that, unfortunately, as much as I like it, and it's a unique animal, and I bring him out often enough, he just isn't for everyone. And what I always like to stress with this is he's very cute, but he is not a pet and should not be treated like a pet.
Can I touch him?
Let's see if I can get him out here first. Come on, there we go. You can come out. All right.
Hi, Sean.
And Sean is a very interesting creature. When we bring Sean places, we always ask the students what kind of an animal this is. And we get a lot of guesses. The most popular guess would be a golden lemur. They look a lot like a golden lemur. They've got the color. They've got the prehensile tail. They look very similar to that. However, once I start giving some hints, we can realize that it's not a lemur at all, because lemurs are primates. They're lesser primates, but they are primates. So he's missing something that they have, and that is an opposable thumb. These guys do not have an opposable thumb, so we know he's not a primate. The other way we can tell is by location. This animal is from Mexico down into South America, and all lemurs are from Madagascar.
Yep.
So we know he's not a lemur, but still, he's just such a unique creature. He doesn't really look like anything. His closest relative, believe it or not, is a raccoon, and he looks nothing like a raccoon to me.
Huh.
So turns out there's only 2 species in this genus. They're very much, to me, they remind me of sloths, because sloths are very unique animals, and there's only 2 species in the genus. It's the same thing with this one. And they're very common where they come from, but they're such a unique creature in the first place. And he is called a kinkajou. Kinkajous are sometimes referred to as honey bears, and they are really, really important in their environment as well.
Yeah,
they come from rainforest habitat. So they do 2 things. First of all, they absolutely love fruit. They're considered frugivores, which means that they don't eat anything except for fruit. So do you want that? Got it? Hang on. Okay, there we go. So he's going to sit here and he's going to eat this banana. And as much as I love giving him bananas, he really makes a mess. And he is, after I use him for programs, I always wind up having banana smeared all over me. So I go through shirts like crazy with this little critter. But when he's eating, if you look closely at his face, you'll notice that his tongue goes way out. And that is really something that we have to take into consideration when we're looking at him and what he does. Yes, he eats a lot of fruit, but he likes that very sweet, the sweetness of the fruit. And what else is out there that is sweet?
Pollen.
Nectar, yeah. So what he does is he winds up getting into a flower, and he reaches his head way back in there to get the nectar out of the flower. And when he does, he gets his face covered with pollen. I found this out the very first time I went to Costa Rica, and I was out at night with a guide, and we saw some kinkajous in the trees. So we shined our flashlights up there, and there they were, big eyes, but they had a yellow head. And I thought, what is this species? I'm not familiar with this. And she said, well, what do you think it is? And I said, well, it looks like a kinkajou, but it's got a yellow face. And she looked at me and she goes, you're right, it's a kinkajou, but where are you getting this yellow face? And I said, look at all the yellow on it. And it dawned on her. She said, no, that's not a yellow face. That's not his coloration. That is the pollen that he's got all over his face from getting into these flowers. So he gets in there. He reaches back with that long tongue. He gets all the nectar, and when he does, he's getting pollen on his face.
And then he's going to another flower and doing the same thing.
Then he winds up moving to the next flower. Yeah. So he is acting like a pollinator, like a bee or a hummingbird. Or in the area where we were, the largest group of pollinators were bats. Bats can be wonderful pollinators too. But in this case, there were these flowers that were these big, huge trumpet-shaped flowers, and they were so big, and they bloomed at night, so the things like the hummingbirds weren't pollinating them. They needed a special pollinator. These guys happened to be a really good pollinator for them, and that is how important they are. Now, that said, and being very, very important in the rainforest, they can also be quite a nuisance animal. You see how fast he ate that banana? Mm-hmm. He can eat 10 bananas in one night.
Damn.
Now, that's a lot of bananas, we know, but if you're a farmer and you're raising acres and acres of bananas, that's really a drop in the bucket, unless more of these show up than you want. And lots of times you'll see that, up to 10 of these will show up at the same time. Now you're looking at 100 bananas a night instead of just 10 bananas. They also have a really unique way of being able to eat while they're hanging from something, and that is they've got this prehensile tail. Now, this prehensile tail allows them to be able to hang from their tail, and they can use their back legs, and what they can do is, let's see if we can try this again. They can hang from that tail, there we go, and use both of their front feet to be able to eat that banana. So now, he's just hanging on there. He's got perfect control in the back, and he is using his front feet to eat that banana.
Can I touch him?
Now, if you were to guess, even if you didn't know this, and we've talked about it a little bit, you might guess that he was nocturnal simply by looking at
his eyeballs.
Yeah, he's got these big, huge eyes, just like that flying squirrel had these big, huge monster eyes. We're seeing big, big eyes on him as well. Is that good? We've had him now for 13 years. They can live 25 years. And in many places, people do keep them as pets. However, I don't recommend this at all. They have, and maybe if you look closely at his face, you can see he does have big teeth.
Oh, yeah.
Even
He's
though
got
he
big, strong jaw muscles, too.
Yep. And this is interesting, considering that he is a fruit eater. And most of the time when we see these big long teeth and we see these powerful jaws, we're seeing a carnivore.
Right. Or at least something that eats insects.
Yeah, there's really no reason for him to have the teeth and the jaws that he does because of what he eats, but he still has those. And now because of that, he can give you a nasty bite. And he's pretty good with me now, but he's bitten me before. Sure. And he's bitten my daughter before. And it was because we didn't understand his behavior. And so it's not what I would consider an animal that you would have for a pet. Most of the time we just don't recommend anything that would be, wild animal or considered a wild animal for a pet. Stick with dogs and cats if you want a pet. So.
He feels really cool.
He's got a very dense coat.
Yeah.
And you can probably feel that on him.
It's so cool.
And this dense coat is not to keep him warm. Remember, he's a rainforest animal, and so he comes from areas where it's really warm anyway. What this does is, because it's so dense, it doesn't allow the moisture to get down to his skin.
Because then he'd get hypothermic.
There's so many things that could happen to him if that water gets down to his skin. Because his fur is so dense, it won't be able to retreat away from his skin. Could cause all kinds of skin funguses and problems like that. And so he has that coat to keep, even the dew is going to bead up on the outside of his coat, and he can shake it off. And so that's what that is for.
Can they swim?
I don't believe they can. They are really good climbers. They spend the majority of their time in a tree. And lots of times people think that they're a monkey. If they first see them, they think they're a monkey. But there's a way that you can just look at them and see that they're not a monkey. And that has a lot to do with how deliberate they are with their actions. When I see monkeys, squirrel monkeys and spider monkeys and those type of monkeys that we see in South America, they tend to jump, and they're very bouncy, and they look very erratic when they're moving through the trees. These guys are extremely deliberate. They won't let go with their tail until they've grabbed on with their front feet and stuff. And so they tend to be slower, but much more deliberate. I hope he doesn't think my ear is a flower.
He loves the hairstyle.
I know it.
Every time. He's like...
Yeah. So he does look like he'd be a lot of fun, but and I do enjoy him, but I would not consider him a pet. What do you think? What are you doing?
He's so cute.
Well, you can see why he would be one of our favorites too. And
Yeah,
he is an animal that we do bring to a lot of our programs. We try and use him primarily for our evening programs because he is so nocturnal. We don't like to constantly wake them up. It's another thing that we're very aware of when we're bringing our animals around, is we don't want to stress the animals out. And so many of the animals that we've had from, including Sean here, we've had from when they were very, very young, and we raise them so that we can introduce them to groups of people like this, and they're not going to be stressed out, because the last thing in the world we want to do is stress these animals out. So, all right, let's see if he will go back into his cage. He's usually pretty good about this. Once he's had his banana,
I like his little snout.
he knows that it's time to go back.
Boing, what a good boy.
And in he goes.
Bye.
Okay. Okay.
I've never held a chinchilla.
You've never held a chinchilla?
I have never held a
Okay.
chinchilla.
There you go.
My mom says that they're just Argentinian squirrels. Is that true?
Basically, that's true. We'll hold this off for a second and take a look at him now. They are rodents. And interestingly enough, this is a chinchilla. There are two flavors of chinchilla, as it were. There's the long-tailed chinchillas. Yeah, there's long-tailed and short-tailed chinchillas. Short-tailed chinchillas are like this one right here. He is.
Look at them whiskers.
He's really cool. His name is Stuart, and we have several of these chinchillas that were given to us, and they were given to us because people get them and don't realize how long they live.
Yeah, and they don't know how to take care of them.
And the care of these guys, they really do make decent pets. They're smart. They are rodents, so they're like the flying squirrel, and they do have a personality. He loves to climb, so he'll stay on your shoulder as much as possible.
The tail is coarse, but the body feels
the tail
like
is
rabbit
quite
fluff.
coarse. I'm not really sure why. I think probably because they're dragging that through the dirt and stuff. But if you feel the fur on him, you can see just how incredibly soft it is. It's an amazing animal, and hence the reason that they started raising them for their fur, or trapping them for their fur, because they were so incredibly soft and fluffy. They are nocturnal as well, and we again will look at the eyes and see that the eyes kind of lend you to think that they are nocturnal, big huge eyes on them. But Stuart we did get as a baby, and we wanted to see what the difference would be between one that was given to us by somebody who was just, sick of having that as a pet.
That's terrible.
And one that we got. It was night and day. So it leads me to believe that people get them. They may spend some time with them for the first 6 months, or maybe even a year out of their life. Here's an animal that lives 25 years. And if somebody gets it as a pet, they may lose interest in it, which means they're not handling it anymore. They're throwing food and water at it, but that's about it. And when we get them, they're difficult for us to use in programs because they're just not tame anymore. Yeah, yep. So we got Stuart. And Stuart is just wonderful. He's full of personality. You can actually let him go down here. He's not going to really go anywhere. He might go and explore a little bit, but it allows us to see him and see how he moves. These are South American. They come from the Andes Mountains. And if we notice his fur, he's kind of molting a little bit right now, but he's got very, very thick coat and very, very fine hair. This means that he stays nice and warm. The problem with any animal that comes from an extreme climate like the mountains is that it could get very hot there as well. And so he needs a way to cool off. So what he's going to do is, we notice that his ears don't have any hair on them. And they're also fairly large. And so those ears are designed to actually cool him off. If we look closely at the ears, let me see if I can pick him up and we get a close-up of his face, we can see that those ears have blood vessels in them. See, especially in the back of the ears, he's got blood vessels on those ears. And those blood vessels carry the blood up into his ears. So if it got hot where he was coming from, he's going to pump that blood through his body and up into his ears. Now, unlike us, if he gets hot, he can't take his coat off. So he's got to figure out another way to cool off. So the blood's going to pump up into the ears. Because it's exposed to the air, it's going to cool off faster and then pump through his body. So it actually acts like a car radiator to cool him off.
Okay.
And he is a short-tailed chinchilla. Long-tailed chinchillas tend to be a little bit larger. They do have a longer tail and a much denser coat as well. But he's still just as fluffy soft.
He really is.
Yeah. Now this long-eared thing we see with a lot of animals that come from extreme climates. We see it in things like kit foxes, and we see it in jackrabbits and things, so that they can wind up cooling off quite a bit. But he needs to stay nice and fluffy soft, and to do that, he needs to take a bath. And so how would a crazy creature like this, oh, and I've got to tell you, before we go on any further, he can't get wet. He could actually die if he gets wet.
Oh, like a sugar glider.
So what happens with them, they get wet, the water gets down to their coat. We talked about that a little bit before. They could get hypothermic. They could wind up getting these skin conditions, skin funguses and stuff.
Yeah.
So if he can't get wet, what does he do to take a bath?
Exactly.
He's going to wind up
use dirt.
taking a bath in the dust. And so, Talia, I'm going to have you hold that for a second. And come here, you.
He's going to be so excited.
You can actually pick it up if you'd like to and hold it. There we go. We're going to see if he wants to take a bath. Now, he's decided that we've touched him and he needs to go ahead and take a bath. So he's going to roll around in there. And you going to come out and say hi? Oh, there he goes. What he's doing is he's just literally rolling around. He's getting that dust down into his coat. And the more it gets down into his coat, it's going to spread the hairs around. It's going to absorb any oils that might be there, and it's going to mean that he's going to have this wonderful coat, and that's going to be a nice fluffy coat. The problem, of course, if you had one of these as a pet, you're going to have to do this on a daily basis. And it doesn't matter to me because he's out in the building with all of my other animals, and he's the least of my worries. But if you had him in the house, you could see that it would be a little labor intensive to try and keep your house from being dusty all the time. Usually what happens is when he's done, he'll come out and he'll rub his nose to get all the dust off of his nose. What are you doing in there? Nope, he's got an itch. There we go. Nope, I guess he's not done. They'll do this for up to 5 minutes sometimes. And they're not the only animals that do this. In their neck of the woods, they have dagoos, which are another little rodent that will do this as well. We see a lot of birds doing it too. You know,
birds
if you
all
walk
the
through the
time.
woods, sometimes you'll see these little burrows where turkeys have rolled around in the dust. And what that's doing is it's getting a lot of the mites and stuff off of them, as well as getting their, you know, putting their feathers in order. So a lot of animals will do this in the dust. Boy, he's going to town today. We have found that these little fish bowls work out very well for dust baths for these guys. So.
And they do this every day?
And they do this every day. So this is why, you know, if you do get one for a pet, expect two things. Expect that you're going to have to give them a dust bath, and expect that they're going to live about 25 years. So lots of times what happens with us is we get phone calls from people who say, I bought this for my daughter when she was 6 years old. She's now going to college, and we need to find a home for it. So we wind up with a number of these things.
They seem super sweet.
And in the wild, they're not doing terribly well. And surprisingly, this doesn't have to do with things like trapping for their fur, like you might think, or hunting of them. It actually has to do with climate change, because where they come from, they need to go from one mountain peak to another. And during the warmer weather, it's just too hot in these valleys for them to go through. So they wind up becoming isolated in these mountains, and they're not able to move back and forth like they should be able to. So it is a shame, but we see that. You might also notice the whiskers on them.
Oh man, the whiskers are crazy.
Big, huge whiskers on them. And understand that this is an animal that eats things like grasses and leaves and things, some seeds and stuff. And they are fairly nocturnal, so if they're running around at night, they want to make sure they're not going to bump into something. So those whiskers are quite important for them. But this is one that we see as being a favorite for the programs that we do, and also as a pet. You know, they're probably more raised in captivity today than in the wild, which in a sense is a shame, but it does mean that we see a lot of these being raised for pets, and I think more are probably raised for pets now than for the fur trade, because you know, that the interest is just lost there, which is good.
Go on.
All right, you gonna come out? There we go.
Feel better?
All right. What do you think? Do you want to go back in your cage?
Yeah, we'll go back in the bowl.
Yeah. He's bath bound here. Okay. There you go. All right. Okay. You want to come out? All right.
Hello. So Zima is a cockatiel?
Cockatoo.
Cockatoo.
She is one of many cockatoos. There are quite a few different species of cockatoo, all of which are from the Pacific area. We see them from Australia up into Indonesia. Her species would be from that area, that Indonesian area. Thank you very much. Okay.
Good job.
They are really, really cool creatures. She is a rescue as well.
She is so neat.
It's unfortunate, but what happened with her is she was left in a house with 40 other birds, the people were evicted and they just decided to leave their birds there.
That's terrible.
So yeah, so we wound up with her, and we were able to rehome most, which is a difficult task because birds are not for everybody. I mean, they can be wonderful pets, but they can be extremely noisy. They can be quite destructive and extremely needy too. They want to be with people all the time. And that is her problem. Let's see if we can get her to come up here and say, you gonna go say hi? Come on, step up. That girl. You want to say hi, Talia? Hi. You can go there. There you go. Okay.
Yay. You can poop on me. I don't care.
And she's done that, so she's all set. These, again, can make wonderful, wonderful pets. And the ones that we're seeing in the way of parrots, she is a kind of a parrot. And we get a lot of different types of parrots, and there's hundreds of species of parrots, and there are parrots, and there's something called Pacific parrotlet, which is very, very small, and then there are parrots that get really large, like the macaws, and she's kind of somewhere in between. But what we find with them is that they have obviously their own personality, but the species has kind of a personality as well. And I find that with cockatoos, they're not the best talkers in the world, but they are wonderful pets, very affectionate. You'll see right now she's panting. She does this because you're petting her and she wants to be petted. And she does two things. You may have heard her say hi. She says hi in that very sweet voice. And she'll cough as well. And this was because apparently her previous owner was a smoker, and because she smoked a lot, she would cough, and Zima picked up her cough. She's not the most colorful bird in the world. She's primarily this white, but she does have some yellow under her wings and a little blue skin around her eyes.
Which is really cool.
But as far as her personality goes, I mean, you can't beat her. She really is fantastic, and the reason that we like her so much is because she's like this with everyone. And this is huge for us because, of course, we're doing programs where we're out on the road and we can't be watching everything at all times. So we want to make sure that that she's not going to bite somebody. And Zima is just a sweetheart. The only person she's ever given any type of a hard time to has been my staff members, especially new members, because she just wants to let them know who's boss. And lots of times she'll chase them around the building and stuff until she's let them know that she runs the show. But they are very long-lived animals. The parrots especially can live, things like the African greys and some of the macaws can live over 100 years.
Oh, yeah.
We expect her to be anywhere from, 75 years on, so she can live quite some time too. And she's, like I said, she's very affectionate. She's probably going to wind up just sitting there and sticking her head under your chin, and she would just let you sit there and pet her all day long. And we do get people that will say to us, oh, don't be surprised if she's missing when you leave. And our response is always, well, I would give you a week before you beg me to take her back, because as nice as she is, when you're seeing her as an angel here, she can be a devil as well. She can chew things up. She does want to be with you all the time. She can be extremely noisy. And so, people who have birds in the house, I'm not sure how they do it, because we have a building that we have specifically for our birds because they are so noisy. So, and we don't really know how old she is either. Because she was a rescue, we think that she was quite young when we first got her, but we're not really sure. The other thing that you may notice with her is she's very comical.
Yeah, she
let's
has
see if I
got a
can get
sense of
her
humor.
to show off a little bit. Okay, so now that she's found you, she's not going to want to come back to me again. Yeah, she said, I know it. Okay, so let's see if we can get her to show off. Are you going to show off? Here you go. Yeah. And she's got really cool feet. All the parrots have these really neat feet that have 2 toes that go forward and 2 toes that go backwards, and allows them to hang on to things. So if we wanted to, or if she wanted to, she could, come here, she could hang on upside down. She's quite good at that. I just trimmed her toenails so that they're not gouging into me, but she could hang on quite well. She can hang on like you would be able to hang on to a piece of fruit. She can hang on to that as well. And so birds in the wild are quite important. They're important for the same reason that most wildlife in the woods is important, and that is because they are seed distributors. So they're going to move the forest around, which is very important. You can go over and say hi. There you go. You can go back there again. Okay.
Yay. Hi.
Yeah. And she likes to be right here. And imagine that she is going to be like this all the time. If she could, she would. She just likes to be with people, and she likes to hang out right there, yeah. They can be somewhat of a nuisance, though, because they are a flocking bird, so you're going to see them in groups of up to 100 or so. And when you see them like that, imagine you're a farmer and you've got a farm, you know, a field of corn or something. They fly in and they're going to wind up doing that, taking over there. Or in a situation where you're raising a fruit crop or something, they can be devastating. So as much as they're important seed dispersers, you know, you might not like them too much if you happen to be a farmer. So. What do you think, Zima? She's not very vocal today. Lots of times she'll be, you know, quite talkative, but today she doesn't seem to be.
Yeah.
There you go. And she's number 6, so she's number 6. And the next time we do a program, we're going to wind up with her with number 5 and go down to number 1. But you know, it's really funny because we're doing this as far as the people that we've asked, you know, what is your favorites and everything. She definitely is one of my favorites. I take her everywhere with me, which is important for both of us because I like her so much. I like to have her with me. But it's important for her because she gets a chance to meet new people. She gets a chance to get out there, and they really, really need that, that mental stimulation. Otherwise, birds that are so intelligent like these guys can really kind of go mad. And so we find it important to have them, to give them a lot of things to do. With her, she just happens to go everywhere with us. And she's usually, you know, number 1 on the list. You can see what she's doing now. She's just sitting there panting and everything. So, I think you can see why she's kind of a favorite of ours.
Yeah, definitely. I don't want to put her down. You can cuddle with me all day. So thank you for joining us for this episode of Creature Teachers. Again, I'm Talia and this is Rick, and you can find us on the next episode about the animals that are 5 to 1 in our top 10 list.